Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Cyber Futures 2020 and Beyond, sponsored by Raytheon on the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today, Dave Frederick, the Deputy Director for Cybersecurity Directorate at the National Security Agency. Tim Coker, the Special Advisor for the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response at the Department of Energy. Wally Coggins, the Director of the Intelligence Community Security Coordination Center in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Matthew Eggers, the Vice President for Cybersecurity Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Sanjay Gupta, the Chief Technology Officer at the Small Business Administration. Now, Matthew, right at the end of the last segment, you opened the door. Automation you brought up, and the importance of automation you brought it up. I'm going to expand that to say artificial intelligence, machine learning. Those are all going to be the path forward to deal with this ever-growing cyber threat. So let me ask Wally to start off. You guys see the threat as much as anybody else. How are you guys starting to go down that path with these emerging technologies?
I'm still a little skeptical when I hear vendors tout AI, that they've integrated artificial intelligence or machine learning. However, we are heavily dependent today on automation and big data analytics. The volume of data being generated by our cybersecurity tools and capabilities is massive, and the only way to parse through that is by using automation and big data analytics to get to what are the things that the cyber defenders really need to focus on. So important to prioritize and important to rapidly discern anomalous activity occurring in environments, because we just can't have humans doing it manually anymore.
Is your concern about the whole discussion of AI is that it's more really predictive analytics versus true AI? I hear that a lot.
Yeah. That's what true AI. I think it's promising. It's going to be the future, no doubt. We're going to need it to get ahead of our adversaries, to where we're actually able to pivot more quickly than they can. But we're not there quite yet, from my perspective.
Dave, jump in on that discussion too. Automation, NSA's got to be using a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got major investments in analytics, and we deal with massive amounts of data. And I would say, in terms of experimentation with AI and machine learning, we're there. We use it in a lot of different mission areas. The area I kind of like to take in a different direction, and that is, when we look at the future, AI capabilities are going to be kind of critical to many aspects of IT use across the nation. And so our focus right now is, how do we start to work on standards? How do we start to work with the industry on ensuring AI capabilities can't be manipulated? So how do we look at software design, secure design principles, and start to really get after that? Because we don't really see a current environment. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of different activities underway. But we're looking at this from how do you ensure people can trust the outputs of AI and machine learning, that you couldn't have an adversary manipulate an AI algorithm and change information in a way that could be harmful to the United States.
I think that's a really interesting point. I remember General Alexander, the head of the NSA, several years ago brought up this idea of disruption, and how the big concern is disrupting of data and changing data. And at the time, I think it's probably, early 2010, 2009, we're all like, oh, that's never going to happen. And then we're seeing it now more and more. So again, I think that's the next thing in the future people should worry about. Tim, jump in here on the discussion on automation.
Yeah, so I think artificial intelligence is definitely the future, but we're not there yet, as much as everyone likes to talk about it. Just in the last few months, actually, DOE stood up an artificial intelligence office to really coordinate and make sure that we're putting our dollars in the place that they'll be most valuable today, and not just all long-term bets, so really having a diversified portfolio. One aspect where our office CSER is concerned, we have an R&D component as well, and we've been really focused on how do you continue to provide, right, whether it's electricity or natural gas, whatever your particular piece is in the energy sector, how do they continue to provide that even while under attack? And so right now we have investments and are doing some research and development on a technology that can do automatic anomaly detection and also accommodation to continuously provide that flow of electricity uninterrupted, even while in a degraded environment. I think that's really the future that we're looking at, is how do we prepare for tomorrow before it gets here?
And I think that's actually a really interesting set of research, because it's not just the energy sector that has to worry about, it's financial, it's telecom. I mean, everything we do, is we all know, depends on some sort of technology. So if something gets disrupted, what do you do? I mean, we've heard that's why the critical infrastructure sector has risen so much. Matthew, jump in.
Yeah, Jason, I was just going to mention, we start off with AI, emerging tech, if you will, foundational tech issues, quantum 5G, kind of all part of the ecosystem from a practical standpoint, policy standpoint. One maybe example of what we try to do at the U.S. Chamber. Just earlier this week, we were visiting with our government partners, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, OD&I, working with businesses in the communications space to talk about threats to 5G systems as we build them out and think about mitigating any threats, domestic, probably more so foreign-based. Those are the kinds of things that we try to do. It shows what businesses are thinking about, and it shows the kind of partnerships that we need and we find helpful.
Did the whole idea of supply chain come up by chance?
Very much so.
Very much so. I guessed. It was a guess.
It is a nonstop topic that cuts across so many different spaces.
That kind of goes back to, I think, something, Dave, you were saying as well, is how to recognize the challenge and if it's in the supply chain, what standards are we using, how do we make sure that the AI that we're using or whatever technology is not beaconing back to a bad guy, to an adversary, and I think that plays into it. I want to go down the end of the table and bring in Sanjay, because you guys are doing something that's maybe using a little predictive analytics. You guys have a deployment of cybersecurity that I don't know if you call it AI, but it's on the cusp maybe?
Yeah, I would not probably fully label it as AI, but machine learning for sure. I know Wally mentioned about anomalous behavior. We have the tools right now deployed, and we are actually reaping the benefits of those tools, which is giving us anomalous behavior. I'll give you a simple example, like improbable travel. Let me illustrate that point. So let's say if I logged in Washington, D.C. at 9 a.m. this morning, and at 9:30 my login ID's credential is used from LA, California. Now, obviously, within 30 minutes, I could not be within 4,000 miles apart in the country. So there is a improbable travel activity, and that's just alerted from that. So these tools are what they're doing are building a user profile based on the usage patterns. And when they see an anomaly to that, they just flag you an alert. So those tools are already available. We've deployed them at the SBA. We've shown it to other federal agencies. So we are seeing the benefits of that. Artificial intelligence is probably a stretch, and I think in general, there's a lot of hype around it. But I think where I see this going is because this is allowing us to become more predictive and proactive. If you think about cyber, largely we have been a reactive organization. When I say organization, meaning the industry as a whole, we are reacting to something that's happening. And that's where we are always behind. The other factor I'd like to put on the table here is the fact that the adversaries are not stopping and using the newest technologies, whether it's AI, machine learning, or quantum computing, and they are going to continue to use that. So we are at a disadvantage, quite frankly, when it comes to that situation when we are not keeping up with those technologies or emerging solutions, because we will be thrown out of the game, if you will, because they have a superior technological edge over what they're trying to do.
Wally, is this why the need, not just for automation, but the need for better tools, better predictive analytics, big data, that's why this becomes so much more crucial because of how Sanjay explained it. The adversaries are constantly working toward finding that soft spot.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be more agile to be able to move ahead of the adversary and keep them from getting traction in the environment that they're targeting. Another basic fundamental thing that we get from automation is right now today there's a pretty severe imbalance between supply and demand in the cyber workforce that we need to do the work. And automation and tools that can do that analytic work, predictive analytic work are really helpful to focus the folks that we do have on the things that are most important.
I was waiting for the workforce to come up. Yeah. Tim, bring it up.
Yeah, I think workforce is a critical issue that we're looking at right now. I know at DOE we've got a few different initiatives underway. We've got our cyber fire training, which is really more focused on the enterprise and helping people grow in their jobs or maybe transition over if they're not currently in a cyber position and just get some hands-on learning from basic courses to more advanced work on forensics and that kind of thing. We've also got our other college-focused training course, which actually just competed last month. It's been expanding pretty much every year. It's been going for the last 4 or 5 years now. And it's hosted at this point, I think about 10 of our 17 national labs around the country. We've had hundreds of participants. And we've actually started to integrate a lot of these efforts that are going on across the complex our Office of the CIO focuses on our DOE-focused one. And so we've set up a progression of sorts. And so the winners of our collegiate competition are actually moving on and going to be a team at our DOE and more professional level competition, so they can see what that next world looks like. And we're also looking at what opportunities are there that we can leverage with our different hiring authorities to potentially make some on-the-spot offers to people who come to these different training programs or to our competitions, because it's really a training and competition combined in one. So those are just a few of the things we've started doing just in the last year or two to further strengthen the work we were already doing, bring things into alignment, as well as support initiatives like the President's Cyber Cup, which is, I think, going on right now.
And I know, Dave, you guys at NSA have the Codebreaker Challenge. We've done a couple stories on that. That's a fascinating and great use of getting people interested in understanding what it means to be cybersecurity workforce in the federal government. I want to move us down the path and talk a little bit about the future. And we've been talking a lot about the future because of the threats. But there's two pieces here that we should touch upon before we let you go. The first part is priorities. If there's so much going on and so many things are happening and there's so many tools, how do you kind of prioritize? And then looking forward, what's missing from the current state of cybersecurity? We can talk tools, we can talk workforce, but from your perspective, if policy, regulations, legislation, whatever it is, what can be done? So prioritization and going forward. So let me start with Dave.
Okay. So in terms of priorities, our number one priority is election security, and I think that's probably a safe bet that for many of the departments and agencies, we're all doing what we can, our part to help election security. So we're working very closely to support DHS and FBI and Cyber Command and their roles to help protect the 2020 election as it comes up. Two other areas I'd highlight is our work to improve the security of DoD weapons systems and the defense industrial base. So we're very concerned about China's aggressive collection and exploitation of the defense industrial base. They're really stealing intellectual property. It's very important to our future national security in the long run. And so we're really focused on trying to improve our ability to support that part of the mission. And then finally, I'll highlight encryption. So we talk a lot about cyber hygiene. You've got to keep the fundamentals secure, and so big focus for us. It's a kind of a unique mission for NSA as we produce the encryption codes and keys and algorithms for all U.S. government communications. And so we have a major modernization effort underway right now to improve and prepare the encryption that's going to keep our nation's secrets secure for the next 30 years.
All right, Tim.
Yeah, I think we have several, top priorities that we're looking at right now in terms of cyber preparedness for the energy sector more broadly. At the end of the day, we want to be doing everything possible to prepare for an incident as much as we don't want it to happen and make it as difficult as possible. But we're not just focusing on the technology, right? There's also the process and the people. We've already talked about the people a little bit, but the process, I think, is really where we're looking to make sure that everything's in alignment. We've done a lot of work with our energy sector partners and our coordinating councils to make sure we have playbooks that are ready and that correspond with the other playbooks that exist both within the department and across the interagency with DHS and FBI to make sure everything's in alignment so that when a bad day comes, we're ready to respond. So I think those are really kind of the top two priorities for us, is that cyber incident response, making sure we're prepared, and then doing everything possible, before the bad day to make sure that our partners are prepared. So that means having a more robust next generation information sharing programs and systems in place. And really it's that relationship at the end of the day. We find, again, we have a lot of different stakeholders that we work with on a regular basis, but that regular relationship, I think, that we're building will enable things like what Dave talked about at NSA, where having a responder on the phone talking directly to a company. We're very much focused on building those relationships and that collaboration so that those kind of things are easily possible, and it's really just a plug and play.
All right, Wally?
Within the intelligence community, our number one priority this year is really improving the quality, quantity, and timeliness of the threat intelligence that we're getting to our stakeholders. And by quality, I mean making sure we understand what actionable threat intelligence the defenders need and working with the sources that can provide that. And so it's not just threat intelligence collected for our decision makers, but in addition, the actionable indicators of compromise, things like that, that can also be provided to the defenders and that they really need to do the jobs that they do. And beyond just improving it within the IC, we have a mission to make sure we get that information to our other partners at the other federal cyber centers, at DHS, at Cybercom, and the other agencies that are working to get that information to the critical infrastructure, the private sector. So we're working hard this year to build those interfaces, build those partnerships, and get those sharing arrangements up and running. Another important thing that's we're looking at this year is a training and exercise program that's the most ambitious that we've ever run before. We traditionally practice train as we fight within the IC. Fortunately, we're more isolated than a lot of the internet-facing organizations and agencies. So we do practice how would we respond to major cyber events occurring in the classified networks. This year, we're teaming with FEMA and DHS and their national level exercise to build a fairly complex cyber scenario to go along with that, to run in parallel and make sure that that whole of government response to cyber events is also being tested.
All right, Matthew and Sanjay, you each get about one comment about your top priority.
Sure. First thing, at least vis-a-vis the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, we're looking to deepen operational collaboration to deal with nation-state bad actors and their proxies or surrogates. And then two, I think we need to really focus on smart regulation. I think we are definitely hearing from Congress, the administration, on approaches that they want to take, but I think we need to listen to one another. I think we need to be thinking about how we want to maintain an open commercial environment. We need to manage security. I think we want to be focusing on how we can achieve maybe some wins for policymakers and industry. It's not going to be easy.
All right, Sanjay, you got 10 seconds.
Okay, well, we are the Small Business Administration, so we are focused on the small business and the entrepreneur. So it's first and foremost is ensuring the information that we collect from them is protected and secured. So that's really the key priority for us in ensuring that continues to grow.
All right, excellent. I'm sorry we could talk so much longer, but unfortunately we are out of time for today. So let me thank my guests, Dave Frederick, the Deputy Director for Cybersecurity Directorate at the National Security Agency, Tim Coker, the Special Advisor for the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response at the Department of Energy, Wally Coggins, the Director of the Intelligence Community Security Coordination Center in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Matthew Eggers, the Vice President of Cybersecurity Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Sanjay Gupta, the Chief Technology Officer at the Small Business Administration. Thank you all for taking the time today. You've been listening to the discussion Cyber Futures 2020 and Beyond, sponsored by Raytheon on Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Raytheon.